What can you do to avoid the dangers of burns? Joining us for some guidance and with some safety reminders around grain bins is Trauma Outreach Coordinator Tracy Dethlefs-Rademacher of CHI Health, Good Samaritan Hospital of Kearney. Tracy, the first full week of this month was National Burn Awareness Week. What can you tell us about the risk of fire?
Paul, burn injuries continue to be one of the leading causes of accidental death and injury in the United States. Those injuries can happen from residential fires, vehicle crashes, and fires from other sources. One fire death is happening every 2 hours here in the United States. The majority of these injuries are preventable. One of the big culprits is adding accelerants to fire. Never add an accelerant to an active fire. Other tips to prevent burns are to set your water heaters at 120 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent unintentional scalds. Create a kids-free zone around any ovens, grills, or fireplaces. Use appropriate heat sources for your homes and garages or shops, making sure that you clean any chimneys yearly. Store flammables in the original containers and away from any heat sources. Clean your lint buildup around dryers monthly and make sure you're cleaning that lint trap with each use. Never smoke in bed or while falling asleep. And lastly, do not overload your circuits or outlets. Make sure you have working smoke detectors throughout your home and business, and don't forget to check those batteries. Also, make sure to have an escape plan and make sure that your family is practicing it to have a safe place to meet outside so that you know when everybody is out. If you do sustain a burn injury or smoke inhalation, seek medical attention immediately.
Joined right now by Tracy Dethlefs-Rademacher, Trauma Outreach Coordinator at CHI Health, Good Samaritan Hospital of Kearney. This time of year, always a lot of activity around grain bins as producers move grain out. Grain Bin Safety Week is next week. Tracy, do you have any safety tips that we can use around grain bins?
Much like quicksand, flowing grain can bury a worker within seconds. Here's a few safety measures that you can practice while working around that grain. Keep all children out of grain bins and wagons. Try to have about 3 people involved when working in a grain bin and enter with a rope and safety harnesses. In case of an accident, it'll take 2 people to lift you out using that equipment. Don't count on someone outside of the bin to be able to hear you shout for help. Equipment can be noisy and block out your calls. If you do become trapped in a bin with flowing grain, but you're still able to walk, stay near the outside wall and keep walking until it stops. If you do get covered by flowing grain, cup your hands over your mouth and take short, slow breaths until help arrives. If you are with another person that becomes trapped, go get help immediately. Never attempt to rescue someone by yourself because you could be wasting valuable time. Turn on a fan to move air in the bin if possible. Also, you may need to cut some large holes around the bin. Try that approximately 5 feet up from the base to empty out the grain. If you do have to cut holes, make sure you're using a front end loader of a tractor, an abrasive saw, or an air chisel. By using a cutting torch, that would be the last resort, as it could cause a fire or explosion from the dust. And lastly, encourage your local rescue squad to seek training for grain bin entrapments.
Tracy, other risks around grain bins are fires and explosions. What do people need to know to prevent those from happening?
Paul, we've talked about this before, but here's a review. To avoid fires and explosions within grain handling and storage operations, it's important to understand the elements that make up the fire triangle. Fire requires 3 things to support it. That's fuel, heat, and oxygen. For explosions, you're going to add disbursement and confinement. Managing fire explosion hazards means focusing on the strategies to eliminate one or more of the elements required to support that fire or explosion. Since oxygen is difficult to eliminate, efforts are usually focused on eliminating one of the other elements. Common examples that would create heat include cutting, welding, torching, or drilling. Avoid these activities and that will reduce the risk of completing the triangle. Dust control is also another step when analyzing your grain handling systems. By controlling the dust, you're decreasing the fuel.
What do you have for some final thoughts, Tracy?
Just as a reminder, keep all of your safety equipment in proper working order and have working fire extinguishers that are readily available. It doesn't hurt to practice using those extinguishers with your family and your coworkers. Make sure you understand how to use them before an emergency actually happens. Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, Tracy. That's Trauma Outreach Coordinator Tracy Dethlefs-Rademacher of CHI Health, Good Samaritan Hospital of Kearney. You can find this interview and many others on the podcast tab of krvn.com. I'm Paul Perkins on the Rural Radio Network.